Street photography is gender-based violence. What? What? Wait, what? Fam. Welcome back to That's the Angle. In this podcast episode, it's a little different. Things are switching up, guys. I mean, it's been a while since I've even recorded a podcast episode. So, guys, please get comfy. Put this on in the background while you're chilling. Think of this more of like a podcast than actually having to watch a video. Is street photography gender-based violence? Because not too long ago, I came across a article on Petapixel, and this lady had written an opinion piece about her experience with male street photographers and how she felt that they were taking advantage of her as a woman, especially in the whole male-woman dynamic, them taking photos of her. And she wrote an op-ed that we're going to get to in a little bit. But I thought that she raised some very valid points about street photography being very creepy and unethical at times and very invasive. So I want to talk about what she said, give you my thoughts on it, and at the end put a nice bow on it. And yeah, that'll be the end of the video. So please enjoy this because it's more of a different format than I think you see on my channel, a lot less produced and probably no editing. So as I sip my coffee with my handlebar mustache and J.K. Rowling interview from 2012 in the background. That's right. You boys are watching all the Harry Potter films over again. And to be honest, I am so obsessed at the moment. So obsessed to the point where I think I might even start a Twitch stream where I read the Harry Potter books from the beginning. Because I've never gotten past the second one, but I've seen almost all the movies. Because I'm going to finish the last one today. And I am so obsessed, guys. I am so obsessed. Like I'm 12 years old at the theater again. But you know what, guys? We need to digress. So let's talk about this article. This is what she said. She goes, "When your photograph harms me, New York should look to curb unconsensual photography of women." And so I want to share with you just her first experience she had dealing with photographers in New York. Because, right, street photography in New York is definitely a whole different beast from street photography, let's say, here in Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., when you're on the streets downtown, you still kind of have a connection with everyone around you, where if you've been to New York downtown at like any time of the day when it's super busy, it almost feels like people don't matter. Where someone probably could have taken a photo of you in Central Park or walking down a main street and you wouldn't have never have noticed. Like, there's a reason why New York is like the There's a reason why New York is the street photography capital of the world. It's because there's so many people and everyone is so interesting. And we associate New York with that. I think in DC, street photography would have a different dynamic because you almost have these intimate moments. And I think street photography in New York is so valuable is because you can sort of take these photos and then disappear back into the abyss of people. But have we ever thought to think about what does the person being photographed feel? You know, we see a lot of famous street photographers, Bill Cunningham, that one lady who did, my mind's blanking on her, but it was a lady who became very famous post-mortem for her street photography on a Rolleiflex. After she died, they discovered her whole stash. I'm so bad to not remember her, but she's a recent legend. But what about the photographers that aren't amazing? The photographers that aren't professional, you know, they don't know the nuances of street photography. Kind of like the first time you shoot like a runway show or the first time you shoot a fashion editorial or anything, you don't really know the proper protocol. And I personally don't do street photography. I do it sometimes like during big events here downtown DC, but everyone's expecting you to take photos. I'm not out in my free time photographing people on the street. I personally just don't find much satisfaction from it, but I have no problem with people who do. However, how about the wrong way to go about it? And I think that's a lot of what this lady here is talking about. And her name is Jean Son, and she's a Korean American native of Queens, New York, where she's grown up. And so here she shares a couple of excerpts of experience she's had, bad experiences with photographers. And it really got me thinking about all this. So let me just read this one. So this is an excerpt of her sharing her experience, her earliest experience with a street photographer in New York. She goes, "When I was 17, I was sitting in Bryant Park. An older man walked by with two cameras and discreetly aimed one at me. I immediately called 911. A police officer made him destroy one of his rolls. Because he refused to say which camera he'd use, to this day, I'm not sure if that photo lives on somewhere. What I do remember is the violation and fear that I felt as a strange man captured something of mine, my image, without my permission. He got to walk away." Now, for those of you who don't know, street photography in public places in America is legal. You're allowed to take a picture of people, property, anything like that, there's no rules. You're always in your legal rights. People will always feel weird about it, and it's an uncomfortable thing to do, but you are within your legal limitations. So in this case where she called 911, and the police officer made him destroy the roll of film, it's not necessarily that he did anything illegal. It's just that he made her feel extremely uncomfortable, and in this way, kind of predatory in a way. Now, to say that she overreacted or say the photographer is in the wrong here, it's kind of weird water. But I think at the end of the day this is a case of street photography. He saw her, a 17-year-old Korean American girl. It probably looked like a nice scene, but she did not feel the same way. She did not share the same sentiment that, this is a beautiful moment. This is street photography. This is art. She didn't care. She just felt violated. She felt extremely violated to the point where she called 911 and had him delete the photos. Now, it's weird because we live in a society where we almost are okay with always being monitored. There's no time that you walk down the street in any major city and you're not on camera. Everything we do is on camera or recorded. So to feel weird about street photography is one thing. But let me go ahead and share another excerpt from her experiences, because I've personally never had anything like this happen to me. Maybe I'm not good enough maybe I'm not good enough looking, maybe I'm not attractive enough to be sitting there and look like a photo moment. But let me go ahead and share this next scene. And so she goes, 5 years ago, I was walking down 57th Street. A man with a long zoom camera lens, which when you really think about it, being out in public with like a long zoom camera lens just looks weird. Like it just looks like you're ready to capture someone's soul. It is very uninviting and intimidating, and I would never be caught in public taking photos of strangers with that. That just seems very like you're stepping on people's personal space, whether it's from a distance or not. But anyways, she goes, I was walking on 57th Street. A man with a long zoom camera lens pointed at me and took a rapid series of photographs. So he hit that quick reaction sports mode. She goes, when I confronted him, when I confronted him, he said it was a free country as he tried to get away. I grabbed him and called 911. That's a little out of hand. 4 business improvement district workers approached us and began commiserating with him as I, the victim, stood gripping my perp by his bag. One said I was making a scene, while another joked that maybe he just liked the pictures. The cop who arrived 40 minutes later discovered that my assaulter had taken dozens of full-body burst shots of me, yikes, which he was told to delete. I watched him walk away in his tan cap and polo shirt with tears streaming down my face and cramps in my hand. I wondered whether I should have worn a different dress to work that day. I wondered whether he'd think twice before pointing his lens at another young woman. Now, this is when things get weird, right? As I sip my coffee and give you some dead air, you like that? And as I turn up the ISO on my camera, and this gets weird because that in a lot of ways does seem like a violation of someone's personal space. And while it's not legally illegal, it's morally wrong, especially if you're doing street photography and someone hits you with that long lens zoom burst. First of all, that's like the sign that you're probably not a good photographer. I feel like if you need a giant setup like that on burst mode, you're probably not a street photographer. Let's be honest. Like if you're a street photographer, you need to be rolling around with like a stealthy film camera that's not invasive. Like think of like Daniel Arnold, who lives in New York, famous street photographer. He carries around like a little ring, like ring focused point and shoot. It might even be autofocus, like complete autofocus, and he just blasts people from the hip. Boom, boom, boom. He never ever looks invasive, but I'm sure there's been plenty of experiences where he's dealt with crazy people who have tried to assault him or get him to delete the photo, but he's shooting on film. Now, this case where you have a long lens burst shot, you actually look at the photos and it's just her burst shotted. It starts to seem like he's collecting bodies. Does that make sense? Like he's almost kind of perverted, and he's going out and he's collecting people's souls on his digital files. Oh, like he's probably gonna like fap to these weird photos of this Asian girl like later on. Like, right? You never know. You never know what the intention is. And I think most photographers do suck. So in this situation, it's weird because even though he took the photos, she instigates it, quote unquote instigates it, and she grabs his bag and doesn't let him go until the cops come. And now this is a weird situation because as a photographer, he's in his legal right to be there and to be taking photos. But she is now grabbing onto him because she doesn't like these photos. Now, in that situation where the reaction of your subject is so volatile and she feels like that, you probably should delete those photos. But at the same time, he might feel like it's art, and so he's not going to. And I think even though it's legal to take photos of people in public, you need to have a moral compass. And I think street photographers this needs to be talked about, which is like, is there a code? Is there a laws? Is there ethics of street photographers? And really there shouldn't be, because then you're prohibiting art, right? Because that's weird. It's a weird conversation we're in now, is because where you're saying we have freedom to photograph outside. However, this girl is saying if you're a man photographing a woman, then there should be special treatments as if you're a woman photographing a man, because we really don't see women street photographers ever, if at all. At least I don't, besides, Vivian Mayer, the girl who became famous post-mortem for her street photography shots. But we really don't see that. It's mostly like a male's game. Street photography in a way is like hunting. Right now I think about it, it's kind of like hunting in the wild, but except your bow and arrow, you have your digital camera and you're collecting these people, collecting the bodies, the skins of the subjects, whatever it might be, which kind of is weird to say it like that, but maybe that's more of me understanding where she's coming from. But like I was saying before, is we need to have like a moral compass, some sort of hierarchy of like, look, all right, you can't tell someone's age, and to say that women and kids are off limits in street photography is nonsense, because that may be an amazing photo. And you can't just assume because someone's taking a photo of a girl or a kid that it is in a sexual manner. If anything, you're thinking the worst. But, if your subject is in a situation where they're confronting you and asking you to delete that photos, I think if you can, then you should. But I'll tell you what, if I shot a whole roll of film and I took one film shot of a girl and she freaked out at me and tried to get the cops involved and get me to destroy that roll of film, I would be like, you can kiss my butt. But we need to understand where she's coming from, because she is not unvalid. She has a lot of validity here. And so she goes, in the wake of #MeToo, I often found myself thinking about this last incident. I was proud that I stood up for myself, but I was promised that if it ever happened again, I'd do something real about it. Like as if she would punch them in the face, or she would have mace or punch them in the balls. So she's taking violence to a non-violent situation. Really interesting. But she's kind of instigating some of it. And then here we go. This is interesting. So there's a lot of rules about street photography that I didn't know. There's a lot of nuances, right? Like, so for example, this right here. He's right. It's not illegal to take photos in public, but women are victimized by this lack of legal protection of our images. Now check this out. This is what really shocked me, and why it's even worth talking about. All this is worth talking about, but this is interesting. In 2014, a DC judge dismissed charges against a man who had taken photos up women's skirts at the Lincoln Memorial. I was literally there 2 days ago, and I could see how if there's tons of people, you could easily get away with doing some creepy shit like that. And then he goes, a similar ruling in Tennessee. Oh yeah, but the judge dismissed against that guy taking up skirts. And then, however, a 40-year-old man who followed women around in Walmart in 2016 in photos of their breast and buttocks, and he had more than, and then. Oh, yeah. So in Texas, a guy who took those photos of Walmart, he was cleared. And then another situation is a court in Texas also sided with a middle-aged man who took more than 70 photos of children's chest and buttocks at SeaWorld. Now, it also goes on to say taking a upskirt photo is a felony in New York. But while it's great that taking photos of specific body parts is considered a crime, any act of photographing someone is degrading. It goes, body parts is a crime. Any act of photographing someone in a degrading, volatile way without her consent in public is wrong, and the law should reflect that. Now, there's the problem with what she wants, and I think her intentions are actually really good, but the problem is that we have to keep this legal, but there's always going to be people who abuse the power, right? There's immense power of photographing people in public, and there's also immense power to making it for it to be bad or to be taken the wrong way. Because if we said that anytime it is degrading or violative in a way without consent, then you essentially kill freedom of like performance in public, but also now it's opinion-based laws. And that is this is where the radical left, and perhaps maybe she's not from that side, where we get too far and now we're going to restrict art. Now if anyone says they felt uncomfortable, now all of a sudden it should be considered illegal. So in these cases that she brings up, this is all morally wrong. I think most street photographers and people watching this would not agree with taking photos of breast and buttocks and upskirts and all that stuff. But in the world we live in, we have to keep these rules open. And of course, bad things like this is going to happen, but we have to be sensitive to it in the way that if you're going to be a street photographer, like I said, just like a general code or rule of ethics. But at the same time, if someone feels a certain way, you're not always going to have people be happy. I'm sure if I was out every day taking street photography photos, I'd run into at least a few person a week who were like felt violated or thought it was illegal, even though it's not. But you have weird fringe cases like this where people are doing sexually charged things, taking advantage of the rules. Is street photography gender-based violence? And I don't think it is. I think this is one lady very upset at the fact that she, as a probably good-looking woman, has been targeted multiple times by crappy photographers. She goes on to state a third example where this kid got like a few inches from her face and took a photo, and he looked at her and goes, "It's art, get over it." That's kind of weird too, because sometimes as a street photographer, you think that the closer you get, the better. Like, I love to shoot Lomography products, and their whole thing is get closer. And I'll tell you what, you don't want me getting that close, because I'm going to end up with a lady holding my camera bag and calling the police. But I think what this lady is attempting to say is she's calling out bad photographers like there always should be. There's a bunch of creepy dudes who use photography as a way to get closer to women. But in this case, we're talking about creepy dudes and people without a sort of moral guidance of street photography. But at the same time, if you want to take good photos, sometimes you got to do bad things. No, wait, that sounds terrible out of context. Let me give an example. Not too long ago, I reported on this channel about a guy who took photos of sex workers waiting for sex to come through, and they were like this was like in Russia and obscure parts of the world where sex workers are literally just like sitting outside. And he took these really beautiful photos of them without their knowledge, and he took these photos. Sometimes he said he even dressed up as a sanitation worker or a road worker so he could get closer to these women to take the photo, which is very fascinating because he didn't ask for consent from any of these women, and he's taking these photos. However, if you look at the work, it's beautiful. And while what he's doing feels morally bad, the photos were absolutely groundbreaking, depicting these women in the way where how they're sitting, waiting for sex work, being themselves. It was honestly great. It was really good work, which is crazy to say, but it's kind of like in Harry Potter where it's like he goes into Ollivander's wand shop and he's given Harry Potter the sister or brother wand to Voldemort. So they have like their wands are linked, and he goes, the person who owns the other wand, aka Voldemort's wand, he goes, he accomplishes great things, terrible, terrible things, but great things. And so it's like that argument. It's like the photographer took a sleazy way to get there, but he made great art. And so what's better at the end of the day? But going back to this article, we cannot have a world where a gender is protected from street photography and the other aren't. I think in this case, what she means to say, or she wants to say, is that photographers, and this is very interesting. She goes, this is scary. This is progressive politics really affecting you and I's art, right? It goes, I have been working with Councilman Jimmy Van Bramer on legislating Covenant and Image Privacy Task Force that will address photography as a vehicle of gender-based violence in public places. If this bill is passed, the next perp will have to think twice before assaulting another woman. Now, this is bad. Like I said, we don't want a gender-based violence thing against men. Now you're making laws specifically against genders. That's bad. But I think what she means is photographers, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, if at all you read this article or you clicked off and you probably didn't get this far, is don't be a creep. Guys, take all the amazing street photography photos, but have some moral compass maybe. Don't go taking photos of boobs and buttocks, but at the same time, what if that's your art show? I've literally taken photos of strangers making out. They didn't even know I took that photo. That feels bad to say, but the photos are amazing, right? So in a lot of ways, I'm defending her, but I'm not defending what she wants to come from it. I don't like how she was treated in all the situations where she felt like her body was a collected file. I can see how that feels like that. That feels very, it's like a romanticized way of how she felt violated, but I think her solution is bad. And I think what she needs to do is just raise awareness like maybe I'm doing and just say, guys, like, street photography is awesome. Let's keep going with it. There should be no laws. We live in the best country in the world, America, where we can even do this stuff. In a lot of countries, you can't take photos of people on the street. You can't take photos of people on the street, especially if you have a curly mustache like me, bro. You got a curly mustache like me, you taking pictures of girls on the street, 10 out of 10, you look like a creeper. Luckily, I don't do that. But guys, at the end of the day, I think two very important things happen here. One is we can't let politics play into art, and we can't let gender-based laws ever be a thing, because then someone becomes a protected class and then things get really weird in the world. But this isn't a political podcast or a political show, and I'm an idiot about politics. What I'm saying is I don't want to see art be policed. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see I don't want you to think twice. I don't want us to feel scared about any kinds of photography. If you choose to go out and take that risk of doing street photography, that's your choice. You have to deal with the consequences of your actions. And if you happen to come across a lady who is pretty violent with you back of you taking her photo, well, I recommend you run or just delete the photos. How about that? But guys, let's be better people. Let's not do this to people. And, you know, I think the photography will be better off. But I do want to know, what are your thoughts and opinions? Is this gender-based violence? Why are most men street photographers? Should there be laws against men taking photos of women out in public? Women can take photos of us too. Or maybe, should there be some sort of education about street photography? Should there be education about street photography just in general? Is there a right way to do it? But then you're trying to say there's a right way to do art. And controlling art is what I don't agree with. This poor girl. Hope she feels better, though. She did deal with some assholes. Anyways, guys, that's it for this kind of podcast. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to do more of these because I got plenty of thoughts on things I know very little about. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. Like it. And, I think I'll actually post this on all the iTunes platforms to kind of get this podcast back up and rolling. Will I ever do in-person interviews again? Or will I ever do interviews ever again on this channel? We will wait until I get the cloud up. That's what it feels like. I got to get the cloud up to get closer to more prominent guests. Sad world I live in. All right, guys. That's it. That's the angle. Photography is not gender-based violence.